Hello guys, David Vos here. Oh buddy, it just got done raining. I'm telling you, it poured. Well, it's a beautiful day here in Alabama. Hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. Today guys, you should stay tuned for this video. It might, for some people, be a little boring to hear this information. It might be maybe a little technical, but for me it's not boring at all. It's just completely mesmerizing information, because I think if you'll pay attention and listen carefully and follow along with what I'm saying, you'll begin to pick up little thoughts running through your mind that start maybe making a few things make sense that never made sense before, ever in history. And you had these questions, and there's just kind of questions that you're not allowed to even ask. Nobody's got an answer for. Like, how did the universe get here, and why are we here, and what are we doing, and all this stuff. There is some mind-blowing information that we're going to give you in this video. So, we're going to get right into some mind-blowing information, but let me just show you real briefly something I found on Facebook, and we'll get started with this. So, I read this little post here on Facebook. It says, did you know that in the Middle Ages, in a French city, just one French city, women would put in the morning a slight poison in the breakfast of their husbands. And then when they returned home late at night, they were given the antidote. So this poison was no harm to human beings. Cause harm? It just made them sick. In case men didn't come home because they were elsewhere, and so the antidote was delayed, men got headaches, nausea, shortness of breath, depression, pain, vomiting. The more the man was away from home, the sicker he was. And then when he returned home, unknowingly, his wife gave him the antidote, and he was better in a few minutes. With this horrible trick, men were scammed because they imagined that being away from home would cause them pain and depression, and so they became attached to their homes and wives. And there's a picture to prove it. Why, look, there's proof. And I was looking at the comments. It says, these were not wives, they were knives. Salute, children of Eve. Name of the poison, question mark. I think she's saying, maybe I don't believe it. What poison was it? Maybe this is just a story. But if you go through this, very few people deny anything. They're like, oh yeah, we should do that now. This is something we should do. Yay, women, And it's crazy. Honestly, I think most people actually just believe this story. This is a prime example of fake news, guys. Just about everything you're seeing is fake news, even the stuff that you think is true, because the government's doing all the fake news. So now the people are running around making up other fake news, and I think it's some sort of game. Because it's like, where's Waldo? The whole world's playing the game now. What is the truth? Nobody can find it. It's behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, because, listen, people are starting to think there is no truth. Not only are we living in a hologram, but maybe it's not even a hologram. Maybe it's not even a real... Maybe we're just a bunch of circuits that's got some sort of lifeless force in it. Energy is some force. Like, remember the saying that they have, that if a tree falls in the forest, but nobody's around to hear it, does it really fall? Is it only consciousness in the universe? No, is the universe conscious? And if conscious beings left the universe, and it was just material universe, would it exist if no one was conscious to see it? So if there is no truth or reality, then, and there is no real consciousness, but somehow, like a simulation, consciousness, but the universe really doesn't have any consciousness. See, that's kind of what science is teaching, because they're saying there really is no God. And when people die, they're gone. You pull the plug on the robot, the energy stops going through the wires, the battery is no longer charged, the memory just goes into nothing, there's no more action on the robot, it just rusts and rots in the soil, and after 1,000 years you'll never find it again, it's gone. Okay, and there's no God, remember, and there are no angels, there's no demons, there's no nothing in the universe. Only material nothingness that fades and keeps coming back, like in some circle. It exists, but no one knows it's really existing. But somehow or another, this thing that didn't exist evolved. Like there was some sort of pattern going on accidentally that sort of made a circuit board accidentally. Like in a universe full of variables. And by the way, I actually have a theory about this, and it's not a theory. I mean, they call relativity a theory, they call gravity a theory, they call relativity is something that most people have heard of. But just about anything in science is a theory, because nobody can really prove anything, not even our own existence. Somebody will come along like Descartes and say, I think, therefore I am, and that makes sense to people, so therefore they accept it. But there's still people out there that don't believe that thinking proves that you are. So, let me give you an example of how ridiculous and stupid the world really is. So, at the present moment, we have these things we call models. That, like I say, they're theories. A theory is a model. Now, they'll tell you that these things aren't really theories. They just call them theories. Okay, but they're facts. But they call them theories. Why do they call them theories? Well, they used to call Newtonian physics fact. And they still say it's fact. But they've replaced it with another theory that says the universe isn't what Newtonian physics says it is. But the model of Newtonian physics actually works in the case of calculus, math. Higher math works and proves, theoretically, right? These are the facts, proves Newtonian physics. However, Einstein says that model is no longer true. It's relative now. On a larger scale, things don't actually work with calculus. Light somehow bends and warps, and if you take off from the planet and go to another star that's 100 light years, 1,000 light years away, by the time you come back, everybody on Earth is gone. You're still a young man. But time is relative. So you can't measure anything like time. It doesn't have any actual measurement, but it's relative to the perceiver. So if in that case, then, if some tree fell in the forest, it wouldn't actually be falling because it's relative to the perceiver. And so therefore the universe is a conscious being, and all the physical parts, though they can be calculated to some precision with Newtonian physics, there is no physical reality. It's just all in our mind, like a hologram. So that's kind of what relativity is. It's kind of starting to delve into that idea. But then they came out with some other new theory that really is kind of like hologram reality. And they call that quantum physics. So everything they say has a variable. But anyway, all these are models. And as we've seen, every model comes along, gets bunked, and then another model comes along. And somehow or another, the facts that they come up with, or the science, or the math, or whatever they got, somehow proves the new model. All right, I'm kind of going to this a little bit more in depth because I want you to understand the point here, what a theory is. A theory is a model that works scientifically, but then is outdated by another model. Who could figure that? I don't know. I don't know what that means. That's the whole point. That's the perplexing thing. How a model that's not true can be proven to work, but it's not true. So I say that because I'm going to show you that all the models are wrong. Every model they've ever come up with is completely wrong. You're told by your doctor you need certain vitamins, certain minerals. Well, can we even prove that there are such a thing as a vitamin or a mineral? They give us a little pill, say, okay, this is vitamin C. Here's another pill. Oh, this is vitamin B. Well, what is that? It looks like a little piece of chalk. It's called a pill. And they say it's got something in it that they're calling these vitamins and minerals and things. Well, I'm sure a scientist somewhere knows why or where supposedly they got this substance. But remember, if there's no physicality, right, then these substances that they're talking about, maybe the model that they're using is a substance called a mineral. And they've cataloged it, all the parts of this system. And this is vitamin A, this is vitamin B, this is vitamin C, this is vitamin D. These are the minerals from helium all the way to uranium or plutonium or something. From the gaseous all the way to the minerals. This is their model. We look at the world this way to this day, even though we've disproven it. But let me tell you what would be like, what the world would be like if we finally accepted the facts as we know them now. If we got rid of this physical model and we said, okay, then there really, like they did an experiment some years ago and they proved that, because for a long time they thought that these things we call atoms were made out of particles. Little particles, they call it. I mean, you've heard of them. You're still being taught this in school, even though in another page, you flip the page or another chapter, they say, oh, but this model's done away. We got a new model now. So this model doesn't work. The physical universe really isn't physical. So they were doing these experiments. I don't think it's necessary for me to go into the details of how they conducted these studies, these experiments. But they did some experiments. Let's just put it that way. And through these experiments, it consisted of somehow shooting light particles or light waves, because there was a theory that maybe they weren't particles. Maybe they were just wavelengths. Okay. Well, what is a wavelength? If it's a thing, if you're talking about, oh, that's a wave, but it doesn't have physicality. Well, then, if it's a wave, but there's no physical, now think about what physical means. It means something you can identify. Because anything that you can identify is a thing. And anything is physical. I mean, it has some characteristic. So if we're not going to identify it as hard, that doesn't mean it's not a thing. It still could be gas. You might not even be able to see it. It could be the wind. But we always thought that if it could be identified, even the wind, it had to have been made up of some sort of physical particle that just happens to be invisible, or wasn't, maybe our eyes couldn't, maybe the impulse of its energy wave as it, maybe it kind of was a different dimension. It's a thing in its own dimension, but we're in another dimension and we can't see that spectrum. It's not in the light spectrum or something. There was always, we didn't assume that something that couldn't be seen didn't exist at all. If we knew that it was there, if we could perceive it, the only model we could think of, you flat earthers, right? You're thinking there's no way it could be what they're saying, a round globe spinning at, millions of miles an hour around another object going a million miles an hour going through the space of a million miles an hour, because it's a billion, trillion years. You think it's impossible. A lot of things seem impossible. Because really we're just talking about models and trying to explain something that nobody can figure out ourselves, who we are, where we are. Okay, we don't know where we are. Okay, we thought that the things we were looking at were real. We thought that, well, look, it looks flat. It must be flat. Now we're finding out there's these laws of physics that are even beyond what we thought. We can't even identify these things in their true form. There is some dimension that doesn't even have form. So now we're saying, well, they're not even physical. I'm not even sure that we should have done that. Because like I said, if anything exists, how could it be not something tangible? I'm not sure the word, we're using English words to describe this. Tangible, physical, what does those things mean? If we discovered those words don't mean real, then I guess you could say, okay, well then they're tangible, but they're not real. Fine, because that's what the word means. Okay, so forget that. Let's use a different word. Are these things actually there? Forget the word tangible, physical, relativity, models, whatever. Is anything really there? So what people have discovered is that we got to go back to the original teachings of the Egyptians, the ancient esoteric wisdom that said that all is atum, right? The spirit. All is mind, and mind is not physical. It's energy. Now, well, Einstein says it's energy, and E equals mc squared, or mass times the speed of light squared. So energy, you can't see it, and in its purest form, I guess you couldn't feel it. You couldn't detect it. Why? Because it's you, and that's the reason why you don't know it or understand it. Because you're trying to see yourself, and you can't unless you got a mirror. You got to see the reflection. You've got to see the evidence. You've got to see the effect of yourself upon something. The imprint, to see that you're really there, right? Now think about this. You can't see yourself. But if you see your image, you're not looking at yourself. You still do not know yourself, or you can't comprehend fully. You're looking at a replica, an image, just the print. So if you look at a print, a copy, you're not looking at the real. So because you are the divine being, all of us in ourselves, our consciousness is the divine being. We can never know what that is because that's the universe. That's us. All we can see is our effect, our image. So this is the reason that for all of eternity, we'll never understand fully what the universe is, because we can never understand fully what we are. Because it's infinite, we'll always be learning more and more simply by looking at the parts. We can look at our hand. Now we know what our hand is, but we don't know what we are. We know that's part of us. We can look at our foot, we can look at our, but we can never know the source, because that's us. So therefore, not only does that mean that we'll never know or understand fully everything, but it also means that we already understand everything. Okay, the universe, what is it? It's you. Know thyself, O man. So if you never see any imprint, if you never see yourself in a mirror, if you never hear yourself talking, you can't even hear yourself think, then how do you even know you're there? This is the big problem. See, this is why we can't just say, oh yeah, the earth is flat, because it looks like it's flat. Well, I don't know if it looks like it's flat to you, but even if you thought it did look like it was flat, that didn't prove anything. Right? Even if you could prove that with some sort of camera, you could focus in on a tree 1,000,000 miles down the road, flat, straight, that wouldn't necessarily prove the earth is flat. Could be some sort of a bending of light or anything. And I don't know that they've ever proved this. I'm not saying that anybody could take a picture and focus in. Like, do you think you could get a camera that's got a good enough focus on it? They could just focus in all the way to China and see the buildings in Hong Kong, or I should say Singapore, Beijing. You could see the buildings from America. No, you couldn't possibly focus in. But somebody would say, oh, that's just because we don't have a good enough camera. Okay, well, we're focusing in on stars hundreds of light years away. We're focusing in on the planet Jupiter, which is like I don't know how many million miles. And we're focusing it and enlarging it so that we can see the craters, right? So why doesn't somebody get a camera and just shine it out there and just show me a picture of China? Because maybe you can't. Nobody knows until somebody can prove that. And the function of the test that you're doing, prove that test proves what you're saying it proves, then you don't know. It's very complicated. But I'm trying to get to a point, and I've kind of veered off. So here's another model of the universe that's more accurate than the one you're being told. And when you know and learn this one, And it may very well be the true model. At least, see, I'm not going to say that as mankind advances in technology and knowledge, and maybe in 1,000,000 years from now, we'll probably understand a lot more than we do now, and maybe we'll find out that what I'm telling you is not true. Maybe there's a higher model yet. I'm sure that that will be the case. I don't think we can comprehend reality in this world we're living in. I don't think I could explain reality to you because I don't think I understand reality. And I don't think my mind could conceive in the present form. Why? Because my brain is a tool that I can use, like algebra, right? I can use it. It's logic. But my logic only goes so far. I can't carry the 2 and hold the 3 and bring down the 1. Right? I don't have that high of mathematical skills, nor does anyone on the universe to know ultimately what the reality of the universe is. But we're just trying to understand what we do know about the universe in a model. And this model that says, now they've already proven this, you see, but they're still using the model. But they've already proven that if you don't observe that wavelength, they did some studies and said that if you are observing it, it behaves like a particle. As if all the laws of Newton apply. But if you're not observing it, you don't pay attention, you do the study without any observableness, then it acts as though it's some sort of wave. So, I don't think in this video I can prove that to everybody's, satisfaction that this is true. But many of you know about these theories and how they've proven that the physical universe really is just energy and there is no physicality at all. And what methods they use to determine this. So let's just start there. So if there's no particle, what that means is this little spinning thing we call the atom that we originally thought had a nucleus, and around that, with a neutron and a proton, some of them had more protons than others and some had less. And then around that was the electron. And depending on how many electrons, it would get heavier and heavier and heavier. So something like plutonium and platinum or gold or whatever has a lot more electrons. It's heavier, right? And the less, so you get some elements that are so light, like helium, they go up. So why, they didn't know. Why helium behaves in the manner in which it does, where it goes upward. It's invisible. I mean, it made kind of sense, but they couldn't figure out why, of course. And what I'm going to show you today in this video is that rather than these little things we call electrons being particles and more of them causing some other element, another substance, I'm going to show you that doesn't exist. See, the elements go from the top to the bottom, from the higher helium all the way down to the uranium or plutonium, the heaviest. Not because they're separate particles spinning around, but this is a vortice, and the nature of the vortice is that you have an up and a down. So that part that sucks is going to be different than the part that pushes. But all of it is part of the whole, because every whole has an up and a down, or a push and a suck, and back and forward, in and out, blue, green, all the variables. So the top of the whole is going to be the high, or the above, and the bottom's going to be the beneath. But it's all one whole. It's not a physical thing. It's part of the other. It's a variable of the whole. This is quantum physics. There are no particles, just the nature of the whole at that level. Helium isn't a particle that you can identify, but it's that part of the whole that acts as the upper part. You're just describing the whole. So there are not various particles at all. Just a harmonious whole. Wavelengths. What is that? I'll tell you what it is. Imagine that the nucleus was the higher, above. And it was something invisible like wind. But it was a force. It was energy itself. It was power. In order to get that power out of there, you got to have an electrical line and run it to ground. Now, ground is going to be the lower. Ground is below. Right? Base. Base metal. Heavy. So you run a line by what? Conducive to the flow of electricity. Right? So copper, aluminum's conducive, but maybe wood is not so conducive. So you wouldn't have a wood. Rubber doesn't conduct electricity. Wood doesn't do a very good job at all. Unless, you can burn the wood, but it doesn't. You can't just leave the piece of wood there and let the electricity flow through it. The electricity will not flow. Why? Well, because electricity is that energy that's inside. It needs to be grounded to the material to be out to get to the outside. And the flow of electricity then will go from the highest helium all the way down to uranium. Your body then has to have all the metals. Now, you only have like a lot of trace minerals, but then at the top, the higher ones, you have a lot of. So, for instance, your body's full of oxygen. It has helium and nitrogen and hydrogen in the air that you breathe. But then you have the fluids, and your body, they say your body's worth, like 90% water. What does that mean? It means that, and that's not actually true. I mean, you might say your body's 90% air, right? They're just making, I don't even know where they come up with this. It's just sort of an illustration. Everything is mostly air, right? And then it's got water. Some things don't have as much moisture, but you can even get juice out of, what do they make? Milk from almonds, right? So there's a lot of juice and stuff you wouldn't think there is. So every physical substance has the fluids as well. And then you get down to the solids, and you don't have very much of that. But it don't take much of that. A little bit of lead, just a trace mineral, a little trace mineral of gold, a little trace mineral of silver, plutonium, boron, whatever kind of, your body has to have all those things. So what is the base part? The base part is the outer. It's hard and material and appears to have a force. It's like some law that says you can't get beyond it. It stops you from getting your hand through. Anything else that's base, that's of that same force. It's kind of like two tornadoes when they come together. They'll bounce off of each other because the force around that tornado is going in a certain direction, creates a certain force, a wind current. And it will bounce off of something solid. But the wind, however, it's still just wind. But the outer force is where all the force is. It'll be very destructive. But inside the vortex, it's like a calm, right? It's very calm. So that's the heaven, right? The outside is the earth. So inside is up and outside is down. We've said this before. The universe is really not up and down. It's inside and outside. But the model we use to understand it's up and down. So we say that helium's up and, because when something goes up, it goes up into the air. We're assuming that's up, but if we're on a round ball, it's not really up. We're just going out, outward. If you want to go really up, you'd have to go within. And that's why the divine being is within you and you're the temple. So if the universe really doesn't have any physical parts, what it does have then is a force. And the force then comes from a very calm place. But when there is some particular thing involved, like in when we look at the world, we see a piece of metal or a conduit for that force. Like a wire on your battery that turns your car over. If the wire is not hooked up, then you can't turn your car over. You got to have the flow of energy. So we used to think then that electron particles were going down through the wire. and somehow into the ignition and down through another wire and to the starter. And that would somehow generate enough power to turn the car over, and it would start, and then the combustion engine would keep firing and it would keep it going. And that would be a motor, and with the motor you could recharge the battery, and this is how we believed it. But we thought it was particles of energy. Same thing we thought everything was made out of, was just a flow of energy that was charging it, making it more solid. Sort of like the theory of relativity we were talking about, where light travels at 186,000 miles. It's a constant. And whenever it comes in contact with mass, then it is warped and bends and refracts and makes all the colors. And eventually it pulls it into a mass. And if that mass gets big enough, it becomes a black hole and it sucks in all the light. So ultimately, there is some power pulling in the light. Now, it would make a lot of sense if that was a computer chip. You know, how do you access a picture on your computer screen? It's just a light, colors and glitters on the screen. It's not even, light doesn't, really have substance, but it appears into these forms. It appears like something's there, like a little hologram pops up. But actually, now we know what a computer is, and it's just information that once you gain access to that information, it's in a file. You have to have a command, you bring it up, and then it puts that image on the screen. Then the image disappears, and it's like it was gone. It's reduced to this little formula. See, it mind over matter. Mind is the only substance. The same mind can think of any different number of things, forms. That computer chip could have all kinds of information and could put on your screen any number of things that would look physical, have forms, pictures, information. But it's all just logic, laws, like 2 and 2, push 2, then push plus 2, and it always comes out 4. Now, 4 is no different than 2 as far as it's a scribble on a page. It's not anything tangible. So there's all these different pieces of information, variables, that it's kind of like you put it in a big bag and shake it up, and if you've got 10 variables, there's thousands and thousands of ways those could fit together, and therefore there could be all these different other now variables that you've made from the variables you start with. So nobody knows whether the ancient ones understood this. They understood it as a whole. They drew it as a circle, had all reality, every variable. But like I said, it wouldn't know itself unless you cut it in half. Now that I'm thinking or conceiving of this left part, I realize that creates a right part. So all the variables are created from the whole. I mean, then you get down to colors, and because if it's not blue, then what is it? Well, it's got to be something else. As soon as you see blue, then you recognize it as blue. You're obviously saying, well, it's not red. So therefore, you're as soon as you invent red, you've invented all the colors, basically, or the idea or the concept of other colors. So this is a very complex thing. What mankind's always known, we've been thinking about this for thousands of years, is that the universe is just mind. That's what the Bible teaches when it says that heaven is real and eternal, but this world is temporary. And in the East, they say it's an illusion. This is a classroom. It isn't really here. It's all in your mind. So if that's true, then what is this illusion made out of? It's not particles. Now, they said it works as a wave. Now we understand what this wave might mean. It means that our thoughts, which are really invisible, their consciousness. Now, remember, that still don't mean that they don't have some substance, because we don't really understand. It may be that the substance they're made out of are very small particles that are much smaller than the particles we think. And maybe the particles that supposedly are there, but that we've discovered aren't there, are really just mostly not there. Again, everything's made out of mostly air, a little bit of water, and then the solid. So maybe the particles themselves have some other deeper, smaller, very, very small. You could never, ever be able to get a microscope and look. I mean, because they're so small. I mean, like, you know, like looking out to another galaxy far, far, far away, like trillions and hundreds of millions of light years away. The whole galaxy is like a little speck. Well, what if you need a microscope to look in deeper into each little particle and realize that you'd have to have the biggest microscope you could ever imagine. You could still never see the little particles that are real physical particles, which is the real existence. That probably doesn't. It's probably not true. We're speculating that there is some essential reality, because if you ever found it, then the universe wouldn't be infinite. See, if you keep, you know, getting higher, more advanced technology of microscopes, you'd keep finding smaller and smaller particles. So there would be no end to whether it be up or down or anywhere. There's no end to the universe. It's infinite. So if the universe is infinite, then you've just proven that it doesn't exist in some ways. Because now you're saying, well, it's just mind, but you have no way to understand what mind is. It's a thing, we're identifying it, mind, consciousness, but it can only be felt, experienced. There is no way that one can literally explain it. Why? This is the great, amazing part right here, guys. Mark this on your calendar and say, this is the day you learn something. The reason you cannot see it is because it's infinite. Because all you can do, like Descartes, is say, I think, therefore I am. Therefore, in other words, if we exist, then we know that we do exist. If we're thinking, then if we're imagining, if we're experiencing, then we know that the universe exists. And we can, with science, with our own logic, we can prove that it is us. We're the center, the thinker, the observer. And that is the part you can never conceive of. You never understand, because that's yourself. And you can never see you are God. That proves you are the divine being. You yourself. It's not outside of yourself. It's within you. The divine being is within you. You are, like Jesus said, I am one with the Father, and the Father is one with me. And ye can be one with us. And they picked up stones to stone him for blasphemy. They ended up murdering him, crucifying him for blasphemy, because he said he was like God. You see, it's not just that we're like God. We are the divine being. All there is in the universe is the one being. And it isn't physical, and it's not there or here, but if you saw its manifestation and you put it in a microscope, you could see what it manifests, or how it expresses itself, how it talks to you, the vibrations of itself. But through the vibrations, all you're going to do is see bits and pieces, glories and kingdoms within kingdoms, and worlds within worlds, and concepts within concepts. But you'll never be able to get back to the source, because the source is yourself, and you can't see yourself. The only way you can see yourself is for male to see female. When a male understands a female, and how do you do that? By having enough sympathy, empathy, love, compassion, caring, gentleness, self-control, kindness, faith, all of these words that describe a feeling. They're not describing scientific realities. They're stuff you can feel, but you cannot prove what faith is. You can't draw a diagram of faith. You can't draw a physical anatomy of love. You can't draw the physical anatomy of hope or gentleness. It's a way that people make you feel. It's a way that you feel. Feeling comes from sentient being. Being is not physical. It's not physics. It's not material. It may not even be energy. We're describing it in that model. But what we know is if we go all the way back to the most amazing logic, that the highest form of logic that human beings have ever been able to grasp. And we come to this, that it cannot be known what we are in its entirety. You can't know what you are, because that would mean that you could get out of yourself and look back at yourself. And then you would say, oh, I mean, look, just think about this. If you had never seen the color green, and somebody tries to explain it to you, there's no way you could explain what green is. Well, let's see, it's a little bit lighter than blue. Okay, well, that could be a light blue, right? That doesn't look like green. Could be yellow. Yellow's lighter than blue. I would say blue's kind of darker. But you're not really describing what yellow is by saying it's lighter than blue. Because it could, red might be lighter than blue. White, beige. We don't know. You cannot really describe. You could say, well, it's kind of minty. Now, the only reason why mint might make you think of green is because that's a language and you're actually thinking of the mint plant, which is a green leaf. So maybe it would make you think of green. But if you'd never seen a mint plant, you wouldn't know what color a mint plant was. See, you've never seen green before. You're trying to describe green to somebody who's never seen it. Or red. Here's a better way to look at it. In this world, we have red, yellow, and blue. And they make all the other colors. Red and blue makes purple. And, yellow and red makes orange. But other than the colors that you've seen before in your life, you've seen all these colors, if you're not colorblind. Now, imagine a color you've never seen before. Other than yellow, red, blue, purple, green, orange, chartreuse, and all the colors that you've seen. Imagine another color. You can't. Why? It's impossible. Why? Because you have to be able to see, know, and experience it to know it. It is self-knowledge. That's why it says in the Bible, this means eternal life gaining gnosis, which means self-knowledge. Your own knowing. Not for somebody to tell you, or math. That's physical. It's just an illusion. This physical world and all the explanations is just an illusion. You're the reality. You can't see yourself, but your woman can see you and you can see her. She's everything and you're everything. But all you're going to see, I say a man and a woman because we're conscious. We have a feeling, we kind of know what it's like to be what we are, but we don't really exactly know what it'd be like to be them. It's just an illustration. Because we've only realized some portion of who we are. Simply because we're not what they are, and they see us and they tell us what we are like. Maybe our wife says, oh, you're so beautiful and tall and dark and handsome, and you're like, what does all that mean? I'm all those things? Oh, so now you kind of determine what you are because somebody told you. And then one day they invent a thing called a mirror, and you can see your reflection. And it turns out that, we are just the reflection, the rays of the eternal sun, bouncing off the eternal foreverness. But we're all part of the same source. We're all little sparks off of the flame. But now, let me get into this even a little deeper. Now, if this whole scenario is true, and I know beyond a doubt this is true, this is the wisdom of Kemet. This is the ancient truth, handed down from the angels. By the way, angel, what does that mean? They are lying to you about the English language is hiding the truth. It came from the devil. John Dee made up the whole thing. And Francis Bacon, they put it in the Bible. And that book called the Bible was our only book that people could read for a long time, 100 years. Now we got other books. But it's all based on the Bible. It's language. It's a story. It tells you our history. And in this book, they say, well, we've translated it, but we don't know the meanings of these words. The language is designed to hide things. For instance, they say the word angel comes from some other Greek word or whatever, and that means a messenger. So they say this is what it means. It means a messenger. But as you know, all the languages go back to the roots. Even English go back to the original root. And the word El is an original root, angel. The El means God. So originally, all the places where it says angel in the Bible, it originally said gods. There are many gods. Paul says there are many gods and many lords. But we have only one Father of the gods and one Lord, Jesus Christ. But to us, our Lord. There are many lords, but we have only one Lord. Okay, there are many gods, but we have only one Father of the gods. Paul did not deny there are not many gods. So they called them gods. They were called Elohim. They're plural. Elohim. That's plural. There are many of these angels. They said, let us make man in our image. So there are plural nouns and adjectives here. Plural means plural, okay? It's not the plural of majesty. These were angels. They were all the beings that are in one whole. Remember what Jesus says, I and the Father are one? They were in one. Because they're in harmony together. They're a family. They're a unit. They're variables of the whole. So, El, angel, is the ain. Remember, everything with an means heaven, high. Anu, means the heavenly deity. Right? El is like the word all, or the whole, the helios, the center, the whole, and the all. So all the words that have the word El, a lot of times today they claim that this word means a definite article. Well, today we have definite articles, but originally they just meant from the source. If it's the whole thing, then you say the word El, because remember, your name is going to include his name, because you're one with him. So Nebuchadnezzar, Zar means ruler, but Nebo was a deity. So the names of the deity, like the Pharaoh had the name Ra in it, right in there, Pharaoh. We were talking about the Ben on top of the pyramid. Ben means a phoenix. Well, why? Was it a different word? No, it just come down to us because the languages are changing, but it's the same words. Phoenician, Enoch, Bin, Thin, it's all the same word. So this is why we have Ben in front of everybody's name, and today they say, this means the son of. It doesn't mean the son of. That's just their way of, they don't understand what it means, so they say it means the son of, because that kind of makes sense. But if you knew what it really meant, you'd understand. Ben means Enoch. The seventh in line from Adam. All is Atum. And so when you say the son of, you're saying this is in the line of Enoch. Ben David. Mogan David. Ben David means the son of David. It just means David of the line of Enoch. But over thousands of years, people forget the meaning. So I say An means heavenly El. But what is a Devel? Dia means, like you've heard, this comes from the word diabolos. Now, this is a good point here. Listen to this. So they say that bolos means to throw, to cast. I don't know what that has to do with the devil, devel or bel, diablos. But why does it mean to throw? It's a ball, diabolos. You throw a ball. They don't even know what they're... So what is ball, the bell, the bull, Baal? It's diabolos. You dabble, meaning you're doing both. The other one, the deuce. Because dia has to do with through. They say the adjective is through. Well, it could be an adverb as well. But they say that dia has to do with through. Well, that's the same. It's come down to it says by as well. By means or through. But again, like the definite article, why does this mean the definite article today? Because originally that was the only one. The, only, the whole. This is the word through. This is going to be the opposite of angel. This one's going to be through bel. The other is the heaven or the highest L. So these are going to be the other side by the deuce. See, dia is also where we get the word deuce, two. And so deuce, two, through, from one point to the next, all the way through, you come out to another side, diablos, the opposite. So this is not an angel, this is a Baal, or a demonic being, not the higher being. So here we have these elves, but we have, remember it says Michael and his angels, and then there was the dragon and his angels. Well, that's because at that point the word angel had now come to mean something a little different. But the root of the word meant high L and the other L's, which is diabolos, diabolical, the other side, the backside. So there was, for eternity, we have the past, and we all came from that. And we may have been growing and learning from glory to glory. At that time, we were doing the best we could. But now we've learned and grown, and we've awakened to another reality. We never want to go back. It's like getting your information from a child. There's nothing wrong with a child. It's good, children are wonderful. But they haven't learned as much as adults. We don't get your information from demons who only know the past, who are not mature enough, and so the past is fighting with the future. If you're stuck in the past, you're listening to demons. Because in the past, you didn't know you could do that. So if you get information and you ask the past, hey, can I do this? The past is going to say, no, probably not. I'm scared. Because I don't know the future. So don't ask questions of demons. But what I want to get to is this model that will blow your mind once you understand it. So since we now know there are no particles, there's no substance, no physicality, what would be a better model then? Certainly wouldn't be atoms like neutrons and protons and electrons, because those things don't exist. We can, instead of thinking of electrons going round and around, think of a wavelength. What is a wavelength? Well, we talked about a vortice. It's calm in the middle. It's very powerful on the outside. But if you look at a vortice, it sometimes has a funnel. You ever seen a twister or a funnel cloud? Well, if you notice that at the very bottom of the funnel, there's a lot of force sucking things up. It goes up inside of it into the center where it's calm, and then it gets kicked out maybe eventually to the top of the thing and spewed out the top. Just thrown out the top and thrown somewhere. So it's a force that goes from the bottom to the top. But around that is another force going round and round. That's what a vortice is. And that's what everything in the universe is. So you're not looking at the hard material part as a particle, but as a force. And the reason why it's so forceful, powerful, and it's so destructive is because it is connected like a flow of energy from the source of the river to the other side where it's flowing. Well, let me explain it this way. Let me start with this illustration. Remember when we were saying that we used to think there was literal electrons going down a wire? And that's made sense because if you cut the wire, you didn't have no flow. So you thought, well, they're going, little electrons must be going down the wire. Now we know that's not the case. The electricity is a wavelength. It's in your house, but it it is going in a circular motion like a vortice. And so the outside of the vortice is going to be staticky. It's going to be powerful like the storm, like the hurricane. It's very powerful on the outside of that when the winds are blowing and ripping trees. But the inside is calm. But the outside is connected to the inside by degrees. So if you can measure the outside velocity of the wind, it might be 150 miles an hour. Now, halfway towards the center, it may only be 75 miles an hour. But in the center, it's dead quiet. Kind of like the spokes of a wheel. Right? Or you ever been on a merry-go-round and you try to catch the merry-go-round as it's going by, it'll flip you out way out into the field. But if you stay in the center of the merry-go-round, you wouldn't feel anything. And you could have a mathematical equation to prove that at certain distance, times the square root of the speed or whatever, you would have an increase in force. You could do it mathematically. But remember, this thing is just wind. From the outside, where it's 150 miles an hour, to the inside, it's all the same thing. Wind, invisible. If the wind isn't blowing, you can put your hand right through it. There's no force whatsoever. You don't even know it's there. But some force gets going and creates a, like heat and cold come together and it creates a vortice. So, what is heat and cold? Well, heat, you can feel heat, you can feel cold, but you can't, there's that word feel. You can't touch it, there's no physicality, but you can feel it. So there's something there. There's something we can conceive of, but when those two things come together, they make something else. Force. But, so this electrical power is like a vortice going through the air, like a wavelength, like a vibration. Drop a pebble in the water. Creates vibrations going out in all directions equally. Now it's on the surface of water, so it's going to be going in one plane. But in the vacuum of space, if you make a movement, the ripples will go out all the way around the circumference in every direction and make a disturbance. And other objects will feel the vibrations and will be changed by that energy that will eventually make its way out all the way. But the further the energy goes out, it gets larger because the circumference is bigger, but it decreases the power of that force now. So if it goes 1,000,000 miles, you can barely feel it. You won't even necessarily notice the ripple when it comes. But eventually, all the energy that was in that point will go out and eventually go into and absorb into some other entity. And they become one. They share energy. But again, we don't know what any of this is. But all we're doing is saying it's not a particle. It's not physical. It's something you feel. It's wavelengths. Now, if that's all true, then vitamins aren't physical things. You can't name them and say this is a thing made up of this form, this structure. If you say, well, it's got 3 walls and this has 4 walls. Again, 3 and 4 is just a concept. A mathematical concept of mind. It's not physicality. You can explain it with your mind, but unless you'd seen it before, you couldn't explain it. So, if vitamins cannot be truly proven to be substances, and we don't even know how many other minerals, vitamins, things, we broke up all the physical universe into all these 100 minerals, these 100 elements. There could be millions of elements, and we've decided there's 100. And then we decide there is no elements. This is just a concept, a model. So what are they? Well, they're simply stages in the circumference of the wavelength. So when you eat food, you should not be concerned. Like, here's why this is such a problem in science. Because scientists are still going by the model that these things are particles, they're substances, vitamins. We've discovered that you're lacking in this thing called calcium. Well, calcium by itself, what would that be? Since it's not a whole wavelength. It's not part of the whole. What is it then? Well, it's a combination of 2 electrons and 3 protons and a neutron, whatever. Well, here's what's really going on. Here's what it really is. Everything that we have identified, that we're now calling non-things, when it was a thing, we had a name for it. We even said it had a certain structure, and you might have been lacking that. You got to take it in order to feel better. Well, it wasn't helping. People weren't getting better taking vitamins. There's no appreciable difference. People go and they take vitamins and they see their health is actually maybe worse. It might be bad for you. People take vitamin E and they find out there's a whole bunch of vitamin E's. And you've just took one vitamin E, one type. It makes your body deficient in other types. If you take calcium and you don't have K2 and phosphorus and magnesium and zinc, then the calcium makes plaque in your arteries and you die of a heart attack. So, when you think of these vitamins and minerals with the model that the doctors are saying, and what then they think, oh, well, if you're missing calcium, we can just give you some calcium. But calcium by itself is going to be one, call it band wave, in the energy bands, right? There's one wavelength called calcium. Now, you're supposed to eat food which is a harmonious 10-stringed instrument playing in harmony. Bring. You can tell the difference between the song and noise. Kang, kang, kang. You know, it's just noise. The beat is off. And it causes you to be anxious and not happy. Okay, what's causing that? Disharmony. So food is all these energy wavelengths that are designed or that are naturally formed from growth, or whatever's going on, this ball of existence we're living in, this wavelength. And it has smaller little, like it's a big vortex or a hurricane, and it's spinning off these little tornadoes, and the tornadoes are spinning off twisters, and they all harmonize these energies and form the shapes that they naturally take. It is simply not a bunch of particles flying around. It's just force, wavelengths. There's nothing physically there. Something you can feel is there. Heat and cold, but nothing physical is there. You didn't bring a few boards and some rocks and create a hurricane. You brought in heat and cold. That made the hurricane. Things you feel. That's why when you have empathy or love, you can affect people. Not with, some chemical. Chemicals are not whole. They're not harmonious. They're not a whole little ecosystem spinning in a beautiful harmony that the Lord made, the fruit thereof, the energy goes up the tree and draws out the charge, the wavelengths out of the ground and forms other beautiful, throws off the little tornadoes from the hurricane. So the tree is like the hurricane and the fruit is like a little tornado. The seed, it makes another tornado all by itself, drops on the ground. That little seed can create the whole tree. Because everything's made out of the one thing, the divine being. But in the divine being, you have things that are characteristic and harmonious, such as red, green, blue. These are beautiful things. They're variables of the whole. You were looking for a rainbow. But you don't want it to be ugly. You want it to be beautiful. You don't want it, just throw some notes out there. You want a song. Harmony. So when you're throwing vitamins at yourself, thinking that they're things of and in themselves that your body's lacking, that's a lie. Your body only needs little vortices of harmony. So this is why singing songs to somebody and telling them you love them can actually help them physically heal more than diet. As long as your body gets some food, it doesn't need more. Your body, of and in itself, is a harmonious vibration. Sometimes the best thing to do for your body is to stop eating. You don't need anything. You're lacking this, that, and no, you're not. Your body will make those vibrations if you let, spin a top. Whing! And it'll keep spinning until finally it starts to wobble, and then it'll fall over. Well, you have cells in your body that are little vortices spinning. If something gets in the way of that vibration, doesn't support that vibration, it can make it stop. Your cells could stop functioning and spinning offsprings and dividing and making more cells, more vortices of harmony. If your whole body's going to be harmonious, you've got to have harmony, which is only a whole fruit. Because that fruit that comes off the tree, that was designed by nature, has all the little harmonies like a song that your body needs to make it go hum. See? But now you say, oh yeah, but I've got some harmony, I've got something spinning in there, but it's about to fall over. That top's going out, right? It probably needs some calcium, and then when that little top will just start spinning again. You cannot infuse your cell with just one part of the wavelength and get that top to spin again. The body doesn't. It's all right to let that cell dissipate. Your body's always renewing more harmonious little cellular vortices over, and new ones come. The ones that spin off naturally, the body uses that energy and it splits off into other new cells, and the waste goes into the sewer. But what is the waste? Well, the waste would be certain cells that might get bouncing around in such a way that it's no longer harmonious. It's no longer spinning off better and good cells, good vibrations. Good vibrations. You got to have those good vibrations. The cells that are wobbling are making you sick. So don't go and just take calcium or vitamin E, because that's not a whole harmonious little vortice. You can't, fix a tune by throwing in another note. All the notes have to harmonize. If there's one note that's not, it's like a B flat, doesn't go in there. It just ruins it. It's dead. It's confusion. So you say, well, we'll just throw another little note in there. Well, you still got that dead note. When that dead note happens, it's going to die. It'll dissipate. Don't worry about that. The body will make another cell. But the next cell is only going to be harmonious if it has harmony coming in the mouth, harmony coming in the mind, harmony coming from your friends and family, from the world around you. You've got to live in a whole environment of harmony. You jump into a pit of, acid, and your body will get ruined, destroyed, consumed by the acid. Jump into a fire pit and your body will burn up. You cannot stop this. That's how the harmonious existence works. By the natural methods of growing from the womb, eating certain foods, hearing certain positive words, singing songs, loving one another. Any of that changes. Somebody comes into your life, starts yelling at you. You're starting to feel sick. That's disharmony. There's nothing to do with, I need somebody to just say one word and that'll fix my negative thoughts. No, you got to get rid of the negative thoughts. Let them dissipate. Forget them. Let them go. They're not really, they're just an illusion. They're just in your mind. Let those thoughts go. Don't try to go and find some unnatural way to heal or mend those negative, broken thoughts. Let them go. Forget them. Now let's make some more positive thoughts, that when we consume those thoughts, we eat from that spiritual food that's giving us that harmony, that will go in and make your whole being well and harmonious. And you'll be on that mountain, at the apex, at the top of the mountain, where the sun shines, and you'll have your 10-string harp and you'll be playing upon it that song, the song of the Lamb, that is one with his Father and all the little children and all the animals and the trees. You're in harmony with all things. You have faith, you know, you give, and then you receive. You love and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's all a big harmony. And you eat food that is whole, that the Lord has made, that is naturally produced. Stop worrying about, do not take supplements. Don't take medicines. Eat food, natural food that grows from the earth, and drink cool mineral water that's natural. It comes from a well or a creek. And you'll be well. And that is the true model, friends. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go. We're over an hour now. And we'll start this again tomorrow and get in some more deep and amazing things. We'll see you then. Have a good one.